Have you ever given something away without expecting anything in return? There's a beautiful concept in Buddhism called DNA, often translated as generosity or giving. But it's more than just a kind gesture. It's a way of being, a way of showing up in the world with a heart open to connection, compassion, and care. When we make offerings to monks or nuns, we are not just donating food or robes. We are supporting the continuation of wisdom, of teachings that have helped countless people find peace in a chaotic world. That quiet act of offering becomes a thread in a larger tapestry of awakening. Giving isn't just about money or material things. It can be a warm smile, a kind word, or even a moment of silence that allows someone else to breathe. Sometimes, it's the courage to forgive. Sometimes, it's the patience to truly listen. When you help someone in need, whether by donating a book, giving blood, or offering a helping hand, you're sharing a part of your life force. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more you give, the more your heart expands. You don't lose energy. You gain clarity, peace, and purpose. Someone once asked me, but what if I'm struggling myself? What if I don't have anything to give? And I said, that's when your kindness matters even more. Because when we are in pain, a gentle word, a sincere hug, or a small act of care becomes even more precious. You're not just helping someone else, you're healing yourself through that very act. True generosity is a state of mind. You don't have to be wealthy. You don't need a perfect life. All you need is a willing heart, a heart that wants to offer something good, no matter how small, to this world. So ask yourself, what can I give today? Not out of obligation or to earn merit, but out of love, out of a quiet joy that says, I see your suffering, and I want to lighten it, even just a little. Because sometimes, the smallest gift, a smile, a kind word, or a moment of understanding, is what someone needs most. And perhaps, what you need most too. Have you ever released a fish back into the river? Or opened a birdcage just to watch the wings take flight? In Buddhism, this act is called fang sheng, which means releasing life. It's the practice of saving animals that were destined to be killed and setting them free. Simple on the surface, but deeply transformative. When you walk through a fish market and see those tiny beings gasping in bags or tanks, their fear is almost tangible. And when you choose to buy one, not to keep or consume, but to return it to its natural home, you're not just saving a life. You're awakening compassion within yourself. We live in a world that celebrates strength, speed, and success. But in that quiet moment, when you hold a fragile creature and let it go, you remind yourself, I still have the capacity to care. Releasing life is also a way to soften the karmic consequences of killing. Even unintentionally, the harm we cause often echoes in our minds, the restless sleep, the unease we can't quite explain. When we choose not to kill, and better yet, choose to protect life, we return to the gentler version of who we really are. I once saw a little boy, maybe 7 years old, release a small fish into a stream. His hands were shaking, but his eyes were filled with wonder, as if he suddenly understood, life is sacred. When was the last time you felt the miracle of life that clearly? You don't need to go to a market today or buy a bird to set free. You can simply start by not stepping on an ant, not swatting that mosquito, or skipping meat for just one meal, as an offering of kindness. Because sometimes, the greatest liberation doesn't come from grand gestures, but from the smallest acts of compassion, quietly given to a creature who needed it most. Have you ever looked at a tiny insect and thought, it too fears pain, just like you? In Buddhism, one of the most foundational yet powerful teachings is non-harming, to avoid killing any living being. It doesn't matter if it's a mosquito, an ant, or a bird. Every life, no matter how small, has a beating heart and a deep desire to live. That's the heart of this practice, to honor life in all its forms. When we step on an ant or swat a fly without a second thought, we forget that we are not the only ones who cherish existence. Not killing is more than avoiding violence. It's about rejecting indifference. It's about choosing empathy over convenience. Take vegetarianism, for example. It's not about being perfect or superior. It's simply a way to step out of the cycle of harm. I once saw a little girl stop her mother from killing a mosquito. She said, "Mom, it's just hungry." That child's compassion struck me. Sometimes, children see clearly what we adults have forgotten. Every creature is trying to survive. And while we can't stop all suffering in the world, we can stop ourselves from contributing to it. Every small act of restraint, every time you choose not to harm, is a quiet act of healing, for others and for your own heart. Ask yourself, What can I do today to protect life, not destroy it? Even the tiniest action matters. Because in a world full of hurt, your gentleness might be exactly what keeps compassion alive. Have you ever paused during a busy day, noticed a tiny insect crawling across your floor, and instead of stepping on it, you gently carried it outside? That small moment holds a profound lesson in Buddhism. Non-killing, the choice to avoid taking life, in any form. Not because we are perfect, but because we recognize that life, every life, is sacred. We often imagine killing as something extreme, hunting, slaughtering, cruelty. But in truth, many of our daily habits chip away our compassion. A casual swat of a mosquito, a meal that involved unseen suffering, or a shrug of indifference toward the pain of another species. I once met a kindergarten teacher who amazed me. Every time a bee flew into the classroom, she didn't panic or swat it. She calmly placed a cup over it, slid a paper underneath, and asked a student to help release it outside. She told me, "I'm not just saving a bee. I'm teaching my students how to live gently with the world." Eating vegetarian, in Buddhist thought, isn't about being morally superior. It's a conscious act, a way to minimize the suffering we participate in. You don't have to go all in overnight. Even 1 or 2 meatless meals a week can be a powerful seed of compassion. And imagine this, if a child grows up in a home where every form of life is respected, even ants and trees, how soft and kind might their heart become? That's how a culture of care begins, not with laws, but with daily, quiet choices. You don't need to make a grand gesture. Just hold back one act of harm, and replace it with a moment of mercy. Because sometimes, kindness doesn't begin with a heroic heart. It begins with a decision not to kill. Here's a question worth pausing for. If a light has helped guide your life, would you help keep it from going out? In Buddhism, that light is called the 3 jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha is the awakened teacher. The Dharma is the path. And the Sangha is the community that protects and carries that wisdom forward. Supporting the 3 jewels isn't just a spiritual concept, it's something real and tangible. Maybe it means helping build or repair a temple. Maybe it's printing a small booklet of teachings and offering it to someone who's struggling. Maybe it's supporting a monk or nun, so they can continue their journey without worrying about food or shelter. Not all of us are called to leave the world and become monastics, but all of us can be part of protecting the path, through our quiet acts of generosity and faith. I once met an old man in a small village. He never stuttered much, never gave big sermons. But every year, he used his savings to print Buddhist books and give them away. He told me, "I don't have the wisdom to teach others, but if a book can help someone live with more kindness, then I feel like my life has meaning." Supporting the 3 jewels is a form of sacred giving. It's not just about money, it's about keeping the light of wisdom alive in this world. And the truth is, when you help sustain that light, you also nourish your own. In a world that constantly pulls us in different directions, remembering and supporting what truly matters keeps our inner compass clear. So ask yourself, what small thing can you do today to keep that light shining? Have you ever walked through a quiet hospital in the late afternoon? There, behind the silence, are weary eyes longing for a visit, hands aged by time waiting to be held. Sometimes, a simple nod, a gentle "how are you feeling today?" is enough to bring warmth to someone's stormy day. Helping those who suffer doesn't have to be grand or heroic. Sometimes, it's just listening to an elderly person who's been alone for too long. Sometimes, it's offering a hug to a friend who just lost someone they loved. Or giving a warm bowl of soup to a stranger sleeping on the sidewalk during a rainy night. In Buddhism, helping the suffering is a noble path. Not only does it relieve others' pain, but it opens our own hearts, making them softer, wider, and more human. Because when we feel someone else's pain, even for a moment, we begin to step out of the tight grip of our own ego. And often, by helping others, we begin to heal ourselves. We realize that pain shared becomes lighter, and that even in our lowest moments, we are not truly alone. Have you ever felt that? That quiet peace when you give, even just a little, and suddenly, your heart feels calm, like a still lake after the storm? 6. Forgiveness, compassion, and reconciliation. Have you ever wondered why forgiveness feels so freeing? In Buddhist wisdom, forgiveness isn't just a kind gesture, it's a powerful act of self-liberation. You're not forgiving someone because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Anger, resentment, the desire to get even, they may feel justified, but in the end, they weigh us down. It's like holding a burning coal, waiting to throw it. The person burned first is always ourselves. I once met an elderly woman who hadn't spoken to her younger brother for over 20 years because of a property dispute. She carried that bitterness for decades. But one day, at a temple, she heard a Dharma talk about compassion. Something broke open in her. The next morning, she picked up the phone and called him. They talked for 3 hours. That night, she said, was the first night she truly slept in 20 years. We don't need to wait for others to change before we forgive. Forgiveness is something we can give ourselves. And when we choose to let go, we become stronger, not weaker. Because true strength is the ability to release pain, not cling to it. Compassion also paves the way for reconciliation. When we stop seeing others as enemies and start seeing them as fellow humans, each carrying their own wounds, we move closer to what the Buddha taught. There are no enemies, only people who have yet to understand each other. So if you're holding on to hurt, take a deep breath. Ask yourself, is it time to let this go? You don't have to forgive right away. Just begin with the question. That alone is the first step toward peace. 7. Spreading the Dharma. Have you ever been struck silent by a single teaching from the Buddha? Just one line, yet it cuts through confusion like light breaking through a storm. Some words don't just inform, they awaken. And that's the power of the Dharma. In a world overloaded with noise and distraction, sharing the Dharma is more important than ever. And here's the truth. It's not just monks or scholars who can spread these teachings. Anyone who has felt even a spark of Buddhist wisdom, through suffering, healing, or reflection, can be a carrier of that light. You don't need a pulpit or a stage. Sharing a favorite quote on social media, retelling a Buddhist story that helped you through grief, or simply sending a mindful video to a friend in pain, these small acts are powerful. They're seeds. And sometimes, they blossom in places you least expect. I once met a young woman who overcame depression after listening to a podcast about impermanence, that everything, even suffering, passes. That simple idea reframed her whole reality. No fancy production. Just truth, compassion, and timing. So if you've learned something beautiful from Buddhism, don't keep it to yourself. Spreading the Dharma isn't about looking wise. It's about keeping the flame of awakening alive in this world. It's a quiet act of love, of healing, and of connection. Let's be those who pass the light on. Have you ever watched a child tell their first lie, and then seen the flicker of guilt in their eyes? It's a moment both simple and profound. A moment that asks us, who will guide them? Who will help them become kind, honest, and wise? Raising a child is more than feeding and schooling. It's about shaping a soul. And in today's world, where screens teach more than stories, where speed overtakes reflection, teaching morality to children has never been more vital or more neglected. In Buddhist tradition, one of the greatest acts of goodness is to teach children how to live with integrity. Not through fear, not by punishment, but through understanding, compassion, and example. We teach them not to lie, not because lying is bad, but because truth builds trust, and trust builds love. We teach them not to harm, not because they'll get in trouble, but because kindness brings peace to both the giver and the receiver. You don't need to be a monk or a teacher. If you're a parent, an aunt, an uncle, a neighbor, you already have the power to influence. It starts with small things. Helping a child understand why sharing matters. Praising them not just for winning, but for being honest. Telling them stories where the hero is not the strongest, but the kindest. Sometimes people say, they're just kids. They'll learn when they grow up. But the truth is, what they learn now becomes the voice they hear inside for the rest of their lives. And if that voice speaks with gentleness, honesty, and courage, imagine the world they'll create. So if you're wondering how to live a life of deeper meaning, consider this. Every act of moral teaching to a child is not just for their future, it's an offering to humanity. And maybe, in those moments, you're not just raising a child. You're raising a more compassionate world. Topic 9. Doing good in silence. Have you ever helped someone and told no one? No photo. No status update. No praise. Just a quiet moment. A small kindness. A gentle act that disappears into the world like a drop of water into the ocean. And yet, something about it lingers. Something sacred. In Buddhism, there's a quiet kind of goodness that isn't loud or flashy. It's not meant for applause. It's not a performance. It's simply this, doing good without needing to be seen. helping someone without them even knowing it was you, paying for a stranger's meal and walking away, leaving groceries at a struggling neighbor's door without signing your name, even just offering a silent prayer, a heartfelt wish for someone else's happiness. We live in a world where everything is documented, shared, liked. But some of the most powerful acts of love are the ones we don't post, because they're not about image, they're about intention. Doing good in silence is like planting seeds in the dark. You may never see the flower bloom. You may never even know if it grew at all. But that's not why you planted it in the first place. You did it because the act itself was enough. Because the world becomes a little softer every time someone chooses kindness over recognition. There's something incredibly freeing about not needing credit. It means your compassion isn't tied to ego. It means you're not waiting for applause. And in that quiet space, something deeper begins to grow. Peace, humility, and a quiet joy that doesn't depend on anyone else. Some of the most meaningful things people have done for me. I never found out who did them. And maybe that's what made them even more beautiful. They weren't trying to be remembered. They were just trying to help. So here's a thought to carry with you. What if your greatest act of love is one no one ever knows about? What if your legacy isn't something carved into stone, but something whispered through the lives you've touched, silently, softly, without fanfare? We don't always need to be seen to matter. Sometimes, we shine brightest when no one is watching. So go ahead. Be kind in secret. Do good in silence. And let your heart rest in the peace of knowing you've made the world better, quietly. Topic 10. Self-practice and moral discipline. Let me ask you something quietly, heart to heart. When was the last time you kept a promise to yourself? Not to others. Not to your boss, your family, or your friends. But to you, to that quiet voice within you that says, "This is who I want to be." In Buddhist practice, one of the highest forms of goodness isn't something we do for others. It's what we do within ourselves. It's the discipline to live with integrity, even when no one's watching. We call it self-practice, meditation, chanting the name of the Buddha, whispered apologies in the form of inner repentance, and most of all, keeping the 5 moral precepts. Not killing, not stealing, not engaging in sexual misconduct, not lying, and not clouding the mind with intoxicants. Simple, right? But far from easy. Because these aren't just rules, they're mirrors. They reflect how honestly, how kindly, how clearly we are willing to live. And here's the beauty. When you follow these precepts, you're not just avoiding harm. You're giving yourself a foundation, a kind of spiritual backbone. A life where you can sleep peacefully. Look in the mirror without shame. Speak without fear of being found out. It's easy to think that doing good means giving, volunteering, or helping others. And yes, those things matter deeply. But mastering yourself, reigning in your impulses, choosing restraint over recklessness, that is a quiet kind of heroism. Think of the person who loses their temper but chooses to breathe instead of shout. The person tempted to lie, but decides to speak the difficult truth. The one who could take advantage, but walks away. No one claps for them. No one sees their inner battle. But they've just won a war inside their own heart. In Buddhist wisdom, these victories, silent, invisible, are often the most meaningful. Because they don't just make the world better. They make you better. More stable. More free. There's an old teaching. To conquer yourself is greater than to win 1,000 battles. And it's true. When you live by your values, you begin to trust yourself. You stop hiding from your own reflection. And that, my friend, is a rare kind of peace. So, let this be your quiet revolution. Start with one breath of mindfulness. One promise to yourself you choose to keep. Because the deepest goodness isn't always what you do for others. Sometimes, it's how gently and truthfully you live with yourself.